Now, in case you're keeping score at home, this is what Craig said. These things cannot be explained by science because science presupposes these things, or at least many of these things. Logic and math. You can't prove that by science. You need logic and math in order to do science. You can't prove metaphysical truths. Like your senses can experience the real world and then properly interpreted, you can draw conclusions from those senses to draw conclusions about the real world. That's called realism. You can't prove that by science. You have to assume that in order to do science. Moral and ethical truths. You can't prove, as he said, that the Nazis were wrong by science. Science has nothing to say about morality. Science can tell you how to build a bomb, but science can't tell you whether or not you ought to use it. In fact, there was a study out of the University of the up north, that university. Who's going to win this year? You guys are shaking your head, not the Buckeyes? Uh-oh. He doesn't know what he's talking about. All right. He's probably rooting for the Cubs or something, too. Okay. That'll be a good game. Is it here? All right. At the University of blank again, they did a study, and they figured out that a third of scientists admitted to fudging data to get the results they want. These are just the third that admitted it. Now, why would scientists fudge data? Any guesses in here?
Funding.
Huh?
Funding.
Funding, exactly. You're given funding to do experiments to get a particular conclusion. And if you don't get the right conclusion, you might be tempted to fudge the data so you can get more funding. Also, you don't want to be seen as somebody who gets a result that your colleagues don't like. There have been colleagues who have said, you know, I think this particular thing is best explained by intelligence, and then they've been denied tenure, they've been kicked out of the academy. In fact, David Berlinski, who we mentioned last night, who's not a Christian, he's an agnostic, but he said, if you think science is objective, you'd be wrong. Why? Because science is only as objective as the scientists, because science doesn't say anything scientists do. Now, I'm not obviously saying all scientists are cheating. They're not. But some of them do cheat, and you can't prove that by science. You need moral truths in order to do science. You can't put honesty in a test tube. Aesthetic truths like beauty and science itself. There are so many assumptions that we are bringing to the table in order to do science. In fact, this is a drawing from the book Stealing from God. My friend J. Warner Wallace, who's an artist and a cold case homicide detective, drew this. Look at all these philosophical presuppositions that you need to assume in order to do any kind of scientific inquiry, whether it's empirical or forensic. You've got to assume morality, free will, logic, realism, uniformity, reason, orderly natural laws, and causality. In fact, the very idea that every effect has a cause you can't prove by science, you need to assume that in order to do science. All of these things you need to assume in order to do science. Whether you're framing the investigation, conducting it, or interpreting the data afterwards, all of these philosophical presuppositions are necessary in order to do science. You can't do science without philosophy. In fact, you can't read the newspaper without philosophy. You can't read the Bible without philosophy. You can't do anything without philosophy. In fact, when you get a PhD, what does the PH stand for? Doesn't matter what the subject is, whether it's history or physics or biology, it's philosophy of. It's an acknowledgement that in order to come to valid conclusions, you have to use your mind, which is philosophy. Now, I don't have time to go through all these. I just want to cover one of them, orderly natural laws. Do you realize that science requires nature to be goal-directed? Question is, why is nature that way? Why do the planets, for example, reliably go around the sun? Why don't they do herky-jerky motions or go in random directions? You go, come on, Frank, it's obvious. There's a law known as gravity. I know, but where does the law of gravity come from? Why is there a law like gravity? And why is it so precise and predictable? Why can we build a spaceship here on Earth, launch it, and know that 9 years later it's going to pass within 7,000 miles of Pluto? Because we can rely on the laws of nature to continue to do what they do reliably and consistently. They're goal-directed. This is true of non-living things that natural laws affect, and even living things. Like where does an oak tree come from? Or what kind of a seed? It's called an acorn, right? Oak trees come from acorns. Why does an acorn, if properly nourished, always become an oak tree? Why does it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? Because it's programmed to become an oak tree. Programmed. Who programmed it? And why is it reliably going in that direction? It doesn't have a mind of its own, yet it goes in a direction to become an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, there must be an external mind directing it toward its end. This is what Aristotle called final causality. That everything in nature is going toward a final end. There's a target, there's a direction, there's a goal that even natural things are going for. But these things they don't have minds of their own. If they don't have minds of their own, yet they're going reliably in a direction, there must be an external mind directing them. That is what Thomas Aquinas said is what we mean by God. He called it his fifth way to argue for God. He said it's irrelevant whether God had or whether the universe had a beginning. The universe could be eternal and you still need God. Why? Because nature is goal-directed, going in a direction consistently. And if it doesn't have a mind of its own, which it doesn't, there's an external mind directing it toward that end. In fact, that's true of you. This is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? Human. In fact, let's go back even further. Let's go back all the way to the point when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. You guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some old people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg. And then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won! Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. That's right, that's right. You give yourself a hand. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were! Now, your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, yet it contained half of the genetic information that makes you you, your 3.5 billion letter genetic code. And your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, and it contains the other half of the genetic information that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. Do you know you have not received any more genetic information from this point till right now? Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. Time, air, water, and food are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. We don't kill the 2-year-old, why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, Frank, you can't legislate morality. No extra charge for this, friends? This is from my first book. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. The only question is whose morality. When people say, don't you legislate your morality on me, I go, why not? Would that be immoral? I mean, you're legislating your morality on me right now, but that's not even the point. This isn't my morality. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder is wrong, that abortion is wrong, that theft is wrong, that rape is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men. I didn't make any of this up. This isn't my morality. It's the morality. It's the one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. So I don't want to impose my morality. And you ought not impose your morality. Why don't we impose the morality? We don't like it, but we know it's there. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. Okay, from this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most of you, anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others heart cells, others lung cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. Knock it off! How do you know how to do that? Are you sitting there going, hang on, Frank, I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming right up. You're not even thinking about this. How is this happening? If you are not directing it, there must be an external intellect directing these processes toward an end. That's what we mean by God. Do you know that developmental biologists have been experimenting on fruit fly embryos in the embryonic stages to try and divert these fruit flies to become something else? You know what these fruit flies always do? They make heroic efforts to get back on track. And these scientists can't get these fruit flies to become anything other but fruit flies. They either get a normal fruit fly, a mutant fruit fly, or a dead fruit fly. They don't even get a horse fly, much less a horse. And evolutionists are saying, oh, maybe non-intelligence can do this. Wait a minute. We're using all of our intelligence to do it, and we can't do it. Why do you think non-intelligence can do this? You see, there are genetic limits to change that we can't break. Breeders know this. You can't break those limits. If we can't break the limits using our minds, why do we think a non-intelligent process can do so? Why are things goal-directed? Are fruit fly embryos conscious? No. How do they know how to become fruit flies? Because there's an external intellect directing them toward their end. Again, that's Thomas Aquinas' fifth way. He's got 4 other ways to argue for God. In fact, this gels very nicely with what the scriptures say. The psalmist said, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb." Paul says that Christ is before all things, and in him all things hold together. God creates the universe and holds it together. He also said, "For in him we live and move and have our being." God is present to us right now. His power keeping all of these processes going in the direction they're going in. In fact, the writer of Hebrews put it this way: the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. See, we think of a God as creating the universe and then leaving it. No, God creates the universe and sustains it. In fact, God is to the universe what a band is to music. If there was a band up here playing music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music. What would happen to the music the second the band stopped playing? Music would be over. That's what we seem to have here. We have a being that creates and sustains. Now, this was not lost on atheist Fred Hoyle, who actually gave the name to what's called the Big Bang. He didn't like the Big Bang, but he gave it its name. And he, after looking at data like this and looking at the fine-tuning of the universe, which we haven't talked much about tonight, he said this. Now, I don't think he ever became a believer in God, but here's what he said. He said, "A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature." You look at everything that's going on in nature itself, it's goal-directed. There's nothing blind about it. There's a mind behind it. Now, to answer the question directly, why does science need God? Because in order for us to do science, in order for us to discover cause and effect relationships, or cause and effect relationships to discover what caused what, we need an orderly universe that's reliable and goes in a direction. If we don't have an orderly universe, we can't do science. If today we put 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen together and get water, and tomorrow we get calcium or sulfur dioxide or whatever, we can't do science. The world has to be orderly and has to be reliably going in a direction. That's why I suggest to you that science needs God. Now, this doesn't mean the Christian God is true. We haven't gotten to that point yet. I think it is the Christian God. That's a whole other seminar. But the point here is that science needs a mind behind the universe. There's no mind behind the universe on atheism. So when atheists are doing science, they're stealing it from God. I'm not saying that atheists can't do science. They can. They just have to steal aspects of reality that are best explained by God in order to do so. In fact, let's sum it up this way. What does God do? He creates, He sustains, that's the one we often forget, and He also on occasion intervenes. When He wants to get our attention to say, hey, you better pay attention to Moses. I'm going to do miracles through Moses. Hey, you better pay attention to Jesus and Paul and the apostles because I want you to obey what they say. That's when God does miracles. But He's sustaining every single second. Now, this presentation I went through quickly. If you want this presentation in a PDF form, go to this website, crossexamined.org/SFG for Stealing from God. And I will email you this presentation and a bunch of other presentations in a PDF format so you can look at it at your leisure. In fact, you'll get the first chapter of the book and a couple other things from my friend J. Warner Wallace. Okay? That's the website. You got to put that into your browser. There's not a link on the website. You're the only one that knows about this, okay? So you got to write that in, send us an email. We're not going to share your email with anybody else. And send us an email and we will send this to you. Now, on the table over there are the books. Crossexamined.org is our website, but the books, Stealing from God and I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. There's also a DVD set for each of these that go through, I think the atheist one is 12 parts, the Stealing from God is 10 parts. So if you want to go through that, you can get curriculum with these things. You can bring a small group through it, whatever you want to do. If you want to go into more detail, it's over there. And all the proceeds from the sale of the books will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay? Just so you know. I got 3 sons, so I need some help. All right? We're also on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, our Facebook pages, crossexamined.org and Dr. Frank Turek. Dr. Frank Turek, like those 2 Facebook pages, because our social media director puts up 4 posts on each of those sites every day. He's an absolute machine. And he puts up a lot of short little videos that you can share with other people. So check that out. And in fact, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've combined these 3 into one social media platform. We call it UTwitface. Okay? So you may want to sign up for that as well. All right? We're on DirecTV, channel 378, Wednesday nights. So, in fact, in 15 minutes we'll be on TV. And in fact, we're doing chapter 1 of Stealing from God. So